Congratulations, you've just been named manager, at least until your boss can find a candidate to fill the position permanently. Well, suddenly doesn't sound so good, does it? Here to discuss the possibilities and perils of taking on a job temporarily is WSJ's work family columnist Sue Shellenbarger, along with Craig Bentley, an executive coach with Bates Communications. Welcome to both of you. Sue, let me start with you, because to me this sounds a little bit like getting cast in a play, but being told by the director, I'm not sure about you, so every rehearsal is actually an audition. Doesn't sound like a lot of fun.
Exactly. Being named an interim manager can feel a lot like being named the permanent understudy. On the other hand, you might be the leading candidate and the company just wants time to conduct a search, so they're sure they've gone through the process correctly. But even if you're an understudy, it gives you a chance to prove yourself, and you may surprise your bosses and prove up to the permanent assignment. So anything can happen.
Craig, as an executive coach, what kind of advice do you give people who find themselves in this position?
Well, we work with leaders at many levels, all the way from Fortune 100 CEOs to high potential rising talent within the organization. And when someone comes into the interim role, as I think Sue started to explain, it can really be a challenge. It's probably one of the toughest transitions they make, because they're almost caught in a certain business purgatory, if you will. They don't necessarily have all the authority that they need to execute, and they need to be careful about some of the relationships they have. So what we advise them to do is to, first of all, navigate the change in those relationships. They now are working with their former peers in a much different way than they were before. Secondly, they need to make a move from being a real technical manager to being a leader, to start putting their business in context with a broader view. They also need to accomplish a couple of things. An interim leader often tries to boil the ocean and try to do too many things. So we advise them to do one or two things that will have an impact in the organization. And then there's also a question for them to show that they can have an enterprise-wide view of the organization, that they can both take that view and articulate it. And then they have a whole another series of audiences, that they have a different relationship with the executive leadership team, with the board, and with their most important customers. So they need to bring authenticity, they need to bring confidence, but they also need to be able to clearly articulate their view of the business and its potential.
Okay, so then what are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen people make in this role?
Well, as I alluded to, I think one mistake is that they tried to do too many things.
Right.
And they push too quickly,
right,
instead of focusing on one or two things they can get accomplished. An interim is often in that role for a fairly limited period of time, 3, 4, 5 months, and they can't restructure the entire business, redirect the entire line of activity, so they need to do those one or two things. And the other biggest thing, I believe, is when they often don't act with enough confidence. They can be a little too concerned about the fact that they're in it formally or informally in that interim role. They're not expressing a clear idea of their own, a clear concept of what that business could be like. So we try to help them really find their own authentic voice, speak with some confidence, while still positioning themselves as learners. They can't disassociate themselves from all the people they've been working with for a long time at more of a peer level. So they need to continue to be learners, to be getting feedback, input, asking questions, and listening.
Well, speaking of input, Sue, does it help to have a frank conversation with your boss about what he or she is looking for and where you may need to step up? Because that can certainly be a tough conversation.
I think it's always a good idea to ask up front, what are the expectations? What skills do I need? Many people make the mistake of thinking they can do an interim job with the same skills they used in their old job, and oftentimes they do need to build new skills and get clear on what is expected and do the best you can to meet it.
So let's say, Sue, though, you do all of that, in the end, you don't get the job. A lot of people will leave out of frustration, but what is the better high road approach?
Well, be gracious about it. Don't criticize the decision. Just discreetly find out where you fell short, why it came out the way it did, and then sit back and consider, is there a place for me in this organization? Increasingly, there's much more than one ladder to where you want to go. And oftentimes there may be a new opportunity that opens up, perhaps because of the skills you showed in the interim position.
All right, that sounds great. Thank you so much, Sue Shellenbarger and Craig Bentley.
Thank you.